My career sucks.
Sex just isn't the same.
What's my purpose?
Where did this fat come from?
My relationship is killing me.
I'll never be happy.
My debt is piling up. I'll never find love. Why can't I be like other gay guys? Hey guys, it's time to get a grip, stop whining, make a bold move, and do something amazing with your 40-plus gay life. Let's get to the show with your Tell It Like It Is host, Rick Clemons, who does his best to never act like a dick or a diva unless you act like one first.
Hey guys, welcome to another episode of 40 Plus Gay Men Gay Talk. It is Pride Month and we're actually wrapping it up. I can't believe we have gone a whole month of Pride. However that looks this year, we'll see how it all turns out when we're all said and done. But I felt like let's wrap it up with somebody who's had some FaceTime on TV, done a lot of stuff, had his own podcast, and he's the executive director of a little project that you might not have heard of called Project Amicus. And you're probably going, well, Rick, what the hell is it? Well, we're going to get into that. It really helps LGBTQ plus people feel safe in the media, talk about how we're represented, all this sort of stuff. And I thought this would be a really good wrap up. His name is David Grasso. And like I said, he's been on TV. He's done commentary. He continues to do TV. And I just felt like he could bring us some really interesting stuff to talk about during these, well, confusing times of how do we talk about our work, our rights, our who we are in the world. So, David, welcome to the podcast, my new friend. So glad to have you here, buddy.
Thank you for having this Florida man on your podcast. Hopefully we keep it not crazy, right?
Well, you know, if we have to go a little crazy, because it is crazy times right now. But so what inspired you to like, hey, this director of Project Amicus, like what was that thing that drew you to like, this needs to be happening? This is something that really compels me.
I think a lot of times we forget that the norms around the world have not kept up with the United States, even now as we're seeing some, you know, backwards movement in certain structures. We still have the right to get married. And fundamentally, homosexuality isn't illegal. In 64 countries plus around the world, homosexuality is illegal. So it's just illegal to be gay. And that's what the project was built upon. This idea that we should use levers of power here in the United States and in other civilized parts of the world to change that reality.
Mm-hmm. And I think sometimes we forget our privilege, even though someone go, well, no, our privileges are being taken away. Okay, yeah, we get that. That's a whole conversation we could go into, but we're actually very lucky in some big ways. You know, at least we have rights, even though some of them seem to have been pulled. But there are countries, like you said, that it's illegal. You can be put to death, you know, you can be jailed, all of these things. And so I'm inviting all of us as, you know, part of the LGBTQ community, but especially as gay men over 40 to go, hey, let's embrace that. We actually have it pretty darn good here. But what are some of the things you've seen that make it a little more, you know, quote, scary, dangerous, misrepresentation that you feel like are some things that guys and our community really need to know out there right now? Like the things that could compel them to go, pay attention.
A lot of places that we regularly travel to, gay people are rounded up regularly. So we have to remember that, and we have to be very conscious of where we travel, where we spend our money, etc. Because really what we don't realize is a lot of times, especially now during these types of political eras, we fail to recognize the power that each of us holds because we are American citizens, not only here in the United States, but as a beacon of hope for the rest of the world. So before you go on vacation somewhere, and before you drop a bunch of money on something, and before you do business with a company, make sure that that country or this place or that company affirms the values that we hold dearly. That's all it's about. And make sure that when you're thinking about public policy here in the United States, think about how it affects millions of people around the world.
Yeah, it's almost like there's a domino effect, right? If the U.S. does something, then it kind of says, okay, this is okay, which I know this is part of the fears a lot of people are experiencing right now. Like, well, if our rights are getting pulled back, now that's the signal to the world. Like, yes, now let's, you know, do this. But what I've noticed just in the things I'm observing is as these things are happening, other countries are like, not on our watch. We're not going to follow that. We're not going to do that. So that's actually a really affirming thing. Like there's almost the you know, shots fired sort of thing. And it's coming back at the US in certain ways. To me, that's something to celebrate. Like, hey, another country saying, course, some of us are like, okay, we're moving there. At least we're there, going there because it's safe. I'm like, cool. I would love to do that too. But I guess I have kids and everything, so it's a little bit different. I'm not going to flee out of here yet. I almost want to say no, because if we all start to leave, who's going to fight the fight? Who's going to be here? Who's going to do representation? So, what are some of the things you've noticed as you've started to work through all of this and been on TV talking about all sorts of things? What would be some of the ways you would say would be in Pride Month, not just 1 month out of the year, folks, to really like be representative, to like show up, you talked about the travel. I think that's a beautiful thing. I mean, I will only travel with LGBTQ organizations that I feel like, okay, first, they have our best interest in mind. They're not going to countries where we're going to be, in danger. Second, they're not afraid to say, we're here, we're queer, and, we're taking over a whole ship, or we're doing a land, a property in some country where like we know we can feel safe. But what are some of the things you would recommend, David?
We have to talk to everyone. I think a lot of the problems we're having now is that we've stopped talking to half of the country, and we've stopped talking to whole regions of the world. Just by being patient and open-minded with people who really think differently than us, and many of whom believe that our lifestyle isn't acceptable. We need to have the patience to talk with those people, even if it's uncomfortable. We've built our own bubbles, not just in the gay community, but also just ideologically. We're self-sorting ourselves. We only live in certain areas. Like here, even I live in a conservative state here in Houston, Texas, but I don't live deep in the suburbs, right? A lot of lesbians do, but gay guys definitely don't, right? And really, a lot of times acceptance is about exposure and mutual understanding. And that's something we knew 20 years ago, but the later generations have forgotten about. So a lot of times it's important to talk to people of faith, to talk to Republicans, to talk to people who you might not think are allies. You might be very surprised what you find. And there's a definite difference between partisan politics and what you see on TV and what individual people think. And I think if we just them other people, we're engaging in the same behavior that has led to a lot of problems for the LGBTQ community.
Yeah, I agree. And, right after the election, I had a really deep conversation with somebody in my world. And I know they're a good person. I know that, but they're very hell bent on, hey, this is the way. And I said, okay, I hope what you say is true, that, these things aren't going to happen. But I said, I would just invite you to be very, observant of what's happening around you. Of course, they only tend to watch, Fox News. So it's very hard to get them to think otherwise. But I've seen a shift already, like as things have started to unravel. One of the pieces of the conversation I had was, I believe they could still come for gay marriage. I still believe that. We'll wait and see. I'm much more in a wait and see mode right now. That person's event is, oh no, he's not going to come for you. I said, okay, let's just wait and see. Not like, screw you, fuck you, I'm not going to talk to you anymore. I'm like, let's just wait and see. And what I've noticed about this person in my world is I'm seeing some shifts, like, oh, I didn't realize that was going to happen. Oh, I didn't know that was going to happen, especially as a lot of the trans rights stuff. And they're not somebody who really understands the trans stuff. But I'm like, maybe you need to ask the questions. I finally said to that person, I said, why don't you try to have a conversation with someone who's trans and really understand? And I think they have,
Well, admittedly, and we could admit this much, the trans issues are very complicated, right? They involve biology and whatever, but as Americans, we should default to freedom, right? So that should be our lodestar, as the conservatives would say, right? Yeah. Like, listen, as long as you don't bother me or do anything that infringes on my rights, you have the right to live freely as you wish to live.
Yeah,
right?
and have your beliefs. Yeah,
exactly. It honestly, like, if you are secure in your own skin, that whole thing shouldn't bother you. Right. But at the same time, there are other very nuanced issues which are way beyond my pay grade regarding medical intervention and sports and all that stuff. And I feel like we spend way too much time talking about that stuff. It is a red herring that has been handpicked to divide people. Because as we know, as gay men, people discriminate based on gender norms, not on sexuality. If you're a masculine gay guy, people love you. If you're an effeminate gay guy, people are more uncomfortable around you.
Yeah.
And we have to realize that political operators realize this and exploit that flaw that we have in human nature in order to divide and conquer. So it's very important to remember that. But that doesn't mean that there's carte blanche to do whatever you want for anyone. We'd have to have measured conversations and appropriate common sense public policy that prioritizes freedom for everyone.
Yep.
And that's it.
That's it. I agree. I love that exploit the flaw. I mean, I don't love that people do it, but that is the game. Let's find the flaw that we think we can make a cultural war out of, and let's make it happen, versus let's talk about the core essence. And I said this to this person in my world. I said, if you don't believe that the freedoms that are getting taken away by some of this stuff for other people, it's not affecting you, I get it. But if you don't believe that this can be a trickle-down thing that starts to happen, and this person happens to be, I'm trying not to reveal everything, but there's a Jewish element to their world. I'm like, you really need to be thinking about this very carefully, because this is how it starts and who knows where it ends. But I think sometimes we don't give it the core essence of, let's just look at the one thing, freedom. Simple thing, freedom. That's what this country was based on, is freedom for all and liberty for all. And I think sometimes even in our own community, we forget these things. I love that you just brought up the whole masculine gay thing, because no femmes, no Asians, no blacks, blah, blah, blah.
We're the keepers of that toxicity, Rick.
Yes,
we are the keepers. We have to look in the mirror and realize that, and we put it under the guise of sexual preference, but we are as guilty of that as anyone else. So why are we shocked by all of this?
Right. And the thing is the more we delve into this, and, this podcast, guys that are listening, we know it's a lot of guys over 40, but well, guess what comes after 40? 50, 60, 70. And there the toxicity starts to realm again. It's like, oh, you're 60. No, you're too old, and it's like, wow, here comes the ageism, here comes this other stuff. And I love the way you just put that. We are the keepers of that toxicity. And then we wonder, well, why are they so toxic? Let's hold up the mirror. Let's really hold up the mirror in these spaces. And
I'm guilty of this. I mean, my husband is very masculine. I like masculine guys. I have generally not dated feminine guys. I am more effeminate than a regular straight male, but probably a bit more masculine than on the gay scale. But that shouldn't be a point of superiority or power over anyone else. And as we get older, I'm exactly 40 years old. I've realized that maybe some of my own programming growing up held these opinions that I hadn't confronted. And it's been a long time coming to really suss out the difference between what I like in the sack and how I treat people. And we really need to value that difference. We can't expect perfection from our government and from the straight community if we can't do it ourselves.
Well, I think you just hit on something really important there, David. We have to value the differences, right? You have to value it. And that's where in that conversation with this friend of mine, I said, I'm gonna value your differences, but I want to just put it out there that we can value our differences, but please quit trying to impose your belief systems on me. You go have your beliefs. I'm told I want you to have your beliefs. I want you to have your valuables. Well, I want you to have your valuables too, but I want you to have your values with a caveat put in there. How is it hurting somebody else? How are you literally hurting somebody else? Which everything could be tied to something like that. But when it's poignant, targeted hurt, there's a problem. There's a big problem, especially when it takes away somebody's freedoms. I'm curious, though. I don't know why this popped in my head when you said that. I guess because when you said you're 40, how do you feel like I'm 61, going to be 62 this summer? How do you feel like that generational differences is now reflected? We're in Pride Month, wrapping it up. As you look at where you are in life versus where you were, how have things shifted on all of these fronts for you personally, David?
I mean, Rick, I think your generation encountered a lot more difficulty than mine did. And then the Gen Zs have encountered much less. And what I think is that difference, like, just let me give you a clear-cut example. I did not encounter the AIDS crisis. I was born in the mid-'80s. By the time I came of age, that was not solved, but minimally there was awareness, there was protection. It was pre-prep, of course, but, you know, and for the young people, it's a totally different world. And that's good. We want to celebrate that. But at the same time, they don't understand the fight and the really the just how socially conservative things were 20, 25 years ago. And I'm old enough to remember that. But I'm still too young to really remember your collective memory, which was far worse of a reality than mine.
Yep. Well, and I was just coming out when that was all happening. I mean, I was 19 when all that was happening. Guys who've listened to the podcast know I had an uncle who was one of the very first ones to pass away from HIV/AIDS. But even then, I didn't get it. You know, I was like trying to figure it out. And then that's when I did go back in the closet. But I think you hit on something really valuable here. I actually said to a younger guy, I said, okay, this was just in the last week. We were having a casual conversation about stuff. And I said, so what do you think about what's going on with the potential CDC and, you know, the AIDS research and stuff starting to be eliminated? He goes, I don't know. What does it have to do with me? It's just like, well, are you on PrEP? He goes, yeah. I said, it has everything to do with you then. Because if that gets taken away from you, it's a whole nother world. It's a whole brand new world if they say PrEP, you can't get it, you need all these things, it's going to be a whole new thing as well. I don't really sleep around. I'm like, I get that, but you need to understand the bigger ramifications. Again, here we go. It's a thing that's going to take away freedoms. It's going to take away abilities to live life on your own terms. And I think this is where, as an older gay, and even in your range, like we have kind of the responsibility to like, let me explain some things, not without like, listen to me, young man. I would never. Well, yeah, maybe if I got really pissed off at somebody, I'm like, oh, you need to listen to me. But I think these are the interesting pieces, David.
There's been a fundamental shift, right? From your era to my era, everyone became a leader, right? We were empowered. We grew up more empowered because you're closer to my parents' age and you guys raised us to be, you know, leaders, right? And I think what's happened with the next phase, and there's a lot of good facets about Gen Z. I don't want to crap on them.
No, me either.
There's a lot of narcissism now. And you were talking about like that ethos of community that's embedded in Judeo-Christian values and many other, you know, religious, you know, and philosophical traditions, right?
Yeah.
And I feel like that's been lost. Like, this doesn't affect me. I live in a vacuum. I mean, I already have PrEP, so I don't need that. I don't care that people in Ethiopia get killed for being gay. Like, that's not important to me. I live in West LA. So I feel like that's become alarming. But what's more alarming is that's actually been adapted by my generation and your generation. This is a universal problem. The difference is we remember another time when we were more communal, less attached to our phones, less attached to technology, didn't depend on them at every waking moment. And this generation does not.
Yeah. And I think that's the thing. Something you just addressed is the crumbling of how we commune. I mean, you'd have to kind of be hiding under a rock to go, oh, a lot of the gay bars aren't around anymore. The places we used to go hang out, they don't exist because, oh, everything's in the palm of our hand. Well, if everything's in the palm of our hand, what just happened to how we communicate? What just happened about how we gather? All of these things are not just a gay culture thing. It's a human thing, but it happens to be the backbone of how we used to integrate and made it through some of the toughest times as a community. Is we had those spaces. And as Pride Month is wrapping up, one of the things that I was really intentional about this year was like, I want to make sure we keep talking about the value of community, because without the value of community, we're not going to be able to be in this space the way we need to be to navigate through. And I think that's what some people are forgetting. Like, oh, as long as I'm good in my little world, you know, everything is fine. And that's
but something else has happened. I want to bring up a little statistic. Coachella was a few months ago, right? Over there in Southern California, right? Near Palm Springs, a gay mecca, right? And back in the day in 2009, when I was a young man, about 20% or less bought those tickets on buy now, pay later. Now it's 60%. What I've noticed is in places like New York and California, people have less disposable income and don't go out a lot. While here in Texas, people have lots of disposable income. If I take you to the gay neighborhood here, your mouth is going to drop. We moved here from San Francisco, and there's a lot more gay life now in red states, hilariously. Blue cities, of course, within red states.
Right.
Because there is more disposable income. There were less shutdowns, whatever you think about that. The consequences of that have been less socialization. And one of the immediate things I've noticed as a Floridian who lived in both Texas and California and New York is that there is a lot more socialization in the growing Sunbelt. And it just, I would say this is raging more than West Hollywood or than the Castro. And I don't think people have caught up to that reality. That we still have spaces. There is a lot of community. There is a lot of in-person socialization. It's just not in the places that used to be the gay meccas. The gay meccas are now moving elsewhere.
Yeah. And I think it comes down to for each person too. I mean, I lived in Texas years and years ago. It comes down to, okay, what is the lifestyle you desire? Like what's going to work for you, you know? And not everybody, I agree, not everybody can afford to live in New York and California in some of these spaces. And as much as they're trying to course correct, I don't think it's ever going to change. This is part of what you pay for, whether you want to call it the privilege or whatever it is. It's just different. And a lot of people like to go, but why would you do this? Because that's what works for them. And again, there's that toxicity. Why would you go live in a red state? I would never live there. Cool. Then that's not for you. But don't bash somebody else because that's what they chose to do or because that's where their work and careers took them. You have to make these choices based on you, not on what the rest of the world is. And as soon as we as LGBTQ people, you know, yuck somebody else's yum because of this is what they're doing, we become the worst culprits in all of this.
You know, it's a head scratcher to me when people tell me, like, I don't like the United States, whether they're American or not. We have 50 different systems in this country. You're talking about Alaska, Hawaii, New York, California, Texas, Florida, and all the others. And I think there's so much choice. We have our own continent. We have a real leg up on other countries. You know, and if you're not happy with the public policies of one state, then move to another. Right. I honestly think the best situation is living in a blue city in a red state because I get the social freedom and the taxation of zero. So that's what works for me. It might not work for others. A lot of policies that are done at the state level here at Texas are obviously scary for gay people. So, you know, and that may make people somewhat uncomfortable. You have children, Rick. It may be a different calculus for you considering the public school system here. Right. But again, that's why we have 50 different systems. We operate like 50 different countries. Choose your own adventure.
Yeah. Well, you know, and to that point, my kids are grown. So the only thing that I have, one lives close to us, the other one doesn't. The other one lives in Seattle. The only thing that I think about when we have talked about, let's move to Portugal or something like that. It's like, yes, but I don't want to be that far away from my kids, you know, and I don't want to be somewhere, you know, where I couldn't get to them if I needed to, yet they're not close. One is around the corner. We hardly ever see her. So welcome to parenthood, which is fine. Because they're grown adults. I mean, I wouldn't expect to see them every day, you know, but I think these are those choices we get to make. And part of this, you know, I'm going to go back to what you do with, you know, Project Amicus is like the safety in the media. Well, just think about the safety in your own world. If it doesn't feel safe for you to go move to Texas, then don't go move to Texas. That's your right. That's your choice. But I love that 50 different systems that you just brought up. My husband and I talk about this a lot. Like, where would we go if we didn't stay in California? And we kind of scratch our head a lot. Like, I don't know. You know, we had thought Oregon, we loved Portland at a point, but we're not big city people. Seattle's definitely not it. We like Washington. Wouldn't say either one of those like jump out to us. Colorado definitely is a consideration. I grew up in Colorado. I'm an ocean kid, so I'm probably the holdout here. He's a mountain kid himself, and so I'm like, I got to be close to water. Colorado isn't close to the water. It's close to lakes, not the kind of water I want. But I think it's an interesting dialogue to have within yourself and with your, you know, significant others, or even with your friends if you're single. Like, if you choose to go live somewhere, you're doing it for you. You're not doing it for the rest of the LGBTQ community. It's plain and simple.
Well, let me tell you, you mentioned Colorado. I'm not particularly a partisan person. We have this tradition in my family to be independents. We're registered independents. But Colorado's run by a gay guy. His name is Jared Polis, and it's probably the best run state in the country. It's growing fast. It's affordable. I just hate the cold. So I can't live there. And I love the ocean. So I could definitely, California, definitely, we could do a whole podcast about all the problems of California, but California has the best weather and is the most beautiful state.
Yeah.
So I agree with your life choice, Rick.
Yeah. And I think this is the thing is, we're getting close. We're getting close to where, okay, we could retire. Do we want to stay here? Maybe not. I don't know. But I think the piece is find your place that works best for you. And that's a lot of stuff. Climate, politics, income, all of these things. But to go, oh no, I could never go to a red state. Then don't. Then don't do it. It's that simple. Nobody's forcing anybody to go do something they don't need to do.
I think if you could go somewhere during the summer, there's one clear destination for our community. My husband and I go there a lot because my in-laws live close to there, and it's Palm Springs. It's very hot during the summer. But if you're an older gay guy, it's really unparalleled. Just even, my husband's younger than me and I look young. So I get treated as a young man typically where I go. And so that doesn't lead to the best service at restaurants and bars or whatever. But when we're in Palm Springs, we're like rock stars because it's our community. It's our people. They have retirement homes for us, and especially for people who didn't grow up in an affirming society, Palm Springs is a breath of fresh air.
Yep, it is. Yeah. Yeah. We used to live really close to there. We lived in Riverside, and it was less than an hour to get to Palm Springs. And it was a great place to just go. Actually, it was a potential destination where we were going to move before we moved up here. And then we said, no, we're going to go to Central Coast, California. But so what is one of the things that you feel like in the work that you're doing right now, before we wrap up everything, like is a really important focus that we as a community or as gay men is a really important focus that we should be thinking of for the, next few years to come?
I think one of the problems endemic in activism is that you really need to stop with the purity tests. So one of the reasons why the right is so far ahead in the United States is because they're hyper-focused on one thing, money. But when you ask what the left wants, it's like, well, we want 50,000 things under the sun and it's going to change tomorrow. So, and there's a lot of purity tests. And if you look at really left-wing politics in general, everyone fights and hates each other, especially in the activist space. So I think one of the things you need to understand is there is our diversity of perspectives, even among the LGBTQ community. There are a lot of Republicans among us. They call themselves the normal gay guys. Most gay people probably wouldn't attach that label to them, but they are part of our community and we need to respect their views as well. We need to talk to them and understand their point of view, especially in this era. I think that's really, really important. It's not comfortable. It's not fun sometimes. And some people are really embittered by everything that's happened, right? They see it as a direct assault on their values. But you have to remember, your ideological opposite feels the same way. So you got to build those bridges. Building bridges is going to help a lot. And if we continue this, us versus them, the younger generation is never going to remember normalcy. Because I grew up in a time of normalcy, but a Gen Z never has. So we have to model that behavior. And really, if you have a conservative family member, we all do, socially conservative specifically, embrace them. You don't have to agree with their views, but you can be a human. And I think that's what's really important in today's work is to, number one, understand that allies come in all shapes and sizes and you can't predict human behavior. And two, remember when we're talking to our own community, be nice to our own community. We have a tendency to be mean to each other and not be on the same page. So I think being human in an era where it's so easy to be a dick is really important.
Well, it's almost like being a dick is, okay, now let's just all be dicks. Let's all be dicks. And that doesn't get anything done. And I know I do it too. I'm not saying, guys, I'm perfect. I'm being really candid here. There's moments I'm like, yeah, just screw it, whatever. Yet then I'll flip onto a group. Or there's a couple of groups I belong to, and somebody will say I'm a conservative gay, and then it's like, again, shots fired. And the things that get said, it kind of breaks my heart. I don't understand it completely either, but I don't know what that means to that person. And so if I don't ask what that means to that person, which none of the people, lovely online wars, nobody said, well, explain to me what that means to you. Not one person, when that person posted that, asked that question. And I don't ask those questions because I want to stay out of the realm just because of the podcast and everything. I don't want to get into it with somebody online, but I will come and have a dialogue with somebody online. Like, hey, come on my podcast. I did reach out to the guy and said, I would love, if you're open to it, not to like, let's disagree. I want to really understand what that looks like to you. And it was sent in a private message. And if you're open to it, I would love to have you on my podcast to show this alternate perspective. And he said no. He goes, I not everybody's, David, not everybody's going to want to be on a podcast, right? But listen, I think what you just brought up is, the purity test. I love that concept.
No, and I'm Cuban American, so it's automatically assumed that I'm a Republican, Miami, right, whatever. And yeah, right, of course, I was raised with those values. I've worked for tons of Republicans, like never had a problem with them. But like, I'm married to a Berkeley boy. He went to the UC Berkeley. He was part of a movement. He was part of the undocumented youth movement. Like, in our house, we try to view politics clinically, and we try not to create divisions among our friends. Right? Of course. I vote. I'm very active. I'm aware of the issues. I try to advocate for our community to the best of our ability. But these whole purity tests, when people call me a pink elephant gay Republican, I just lean into it. I'm like, okay, well, that's good for you if you think that. Like, do you want to see my, oh, well, I saw you on Newsmax and Fox. Yeah, I do conservative media. Because if I don't do it, someone else is going to do it. So Isn't it better to have me doing it than somebody else, right? And have you listened to what I said, or are you just looking at the Chiron?
Yeah, you're just looking at the highlight and go, oh, nope, out. Nope.
You're obviously, and if you know the way we were raised in my household, we are a militantly apolitical family. Just because we're aware of politics does not mean it's ever been an issue with anyone. Of course, we're Cuban, so most of our extended family is, Trumpkins or us. But we also have very liberal friends, and we've always made it work. In the 90s, friends, that was not an issue. Nobody cared. So always remember that. While politics is very important, at the same time, it is also very unimportant at other times. Know the difference.
And when you make it important when it should be unimportant, then you're actually the problem. So, well, David, I love this conversation. We are wrapping up Pride Month. I think this gave a lot of different perspective on how to look at things. I love the building bridges and the purity test stuff that you brought up, because sometimes we have to do those things to get people back to thinking central about what is the freedom? What is the freedom? But you can't not get there if you're like, I'm not going to talk to them. Not going to talk. Nope. Not going to happen. So
keep your mind open and your brain open. If we expect other people who are very traditional to be open-minded, right, and they other us, why are we engaging in the same behavior? That makes us the same, and that's counterproductive to everyone. We can't expect that from our counterparts. They're just going to treat us with the same amount of hate.
Yep.
Hate cannot, darkness does drive out darkness. Only light can do that. Martin Luther King said that. Hate is the only thing you can do with hate is replace it with love. Love your ideological opposite. Understand the walk understand their shoes. Understand that they may have their own struggles.
If you can't try to understand them and be empathetic, you are right there othering and cutting it off and all of this sort of stuff. It just doesn't work. So,
and we all do this. Stop yourself. We all do it. I freeze my husband when he does this. I'm like, don't do that. Okay. Because you're just doing the same thing. Right.
Yeah.
So just remember that we're trained in mental models these days where everything is opinion, right? And everything is us versus them. Don't do that. Remember to remember the difference. Vote, be politically active, understand public policy, understand what's going on, but treat people like humans the way you would want to be treated.
That's beautiful advice. Perfect way to wrap up, man. Thank you
Always
so much
pleasure,
for
Rick.
being here. And again, if you all want to connect with the stuff that Dave is doing, we'll have all of his stuff, social media, all that stuff, so you can follow him. I've been following him on Instagram. Love the posts I'm seeing, the exploration. And thanks for being here, everyone, and listening. And happy winding up Pride Month. But remember, Pride doesn't end at the end of the month. Pride is an everyday occurrence. However that works for you. Doesn't mean you have to wave rainbow flags or anything. Go be you in the world in the way that makes you feel alive as an LGBTQ person, and especially as a gay man over 40. And we're going to have another show in just another week. So again, thank you, David, so much for sharing your time and being part of this month's celebration. Take care, everyone.
That's a wrap for 40 Plus. Gay men, gay talk, where size doesn't matter. We drop our bullshit, get over our screwed up fears, make bold moves, and live life without apologies. Don't forget to join us on Facebook at 40 Plus, Gay Men, Gay Talk, where the conversations continue.